You only write your first book once, and that first book is usually filled with your hopes and dreams. And in my case, I signed up for double the punishment. My first novel was an interactive novel I describe as a choose-your-own adventure for adults. So not only did I have to learn how to write a novel, I had to learn how to make it interactive and engaging. In this week's episode, I'm going to talk about the process of creating my first book, Magic Souls. I'm Michael Laron, and this is the Writer's Journey podcast, where you get a window into the life of a working science fiction and fantasy author. I'm on a mission to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I share my progress and discover what inspires my books and how I write them. You can find the show notes for today's episode at michaellaron.com/podcast. This week, I'm taking you behind the scenes of my writing process. Hello and welcome to episode 32. This week, I thought I'd take you behind the scenes of my first novel, the one that put me on the publishing map. The year was 2012 and I had just gotten out of the hospital. I was listening to all the major podcasts, learning how to self-publish, but I had no idea what I wanted to write. Around that time, maybe a few months later, I stumbled across a few old choose-your-own-adventure books. They were fun to read, and I wondered what had ever happened to them. I found one on Amazon and was surprised to see a Kindle version. I downloaded it, expecting to relive my childhood, but what I found was that the book hadn't aged well. The reading experience hadn't aged well either, and this kind of interactive book was not easy to read on a Kindle. I searched to see if the interactive fiction genre had evolved. Aside from a few books that tried to update the genre to a modern era, most of them were in the same style. Fun, second-person POV with more of a game book approach. And there was a big movement for text-based games, but that wasn't something I was interested in. I wanted to read a novel like the ones I was reading now as an adult, but interactive. I wanted a book with an adult character who had depth. I wanted a book that wasn't in the second person. I wanted something with some storytelling behind it rather than just basic endless choices. I wanted a story structure. Turns out that didn't exist, so I decided to create it. I discovered that writing an interactive novel wasn't going to be easy. I hadn't written a novel before, so I had to learn how to do that. That in and of itself is enough to make some people quit. I had to go and punish myself further and make it interactive. But I didn't know the first thing about ebook formatting. I barely knew what an ebook was. I had read plenty of them, but I didn't know the first thing about how you'd go about creating one. Yet I had this vision of an incredibly interactive novel on my mind, one that built upon the traits that made Choose Your Own Adventure so popular, but evolved them. There were a lot of things I felt were holding this genre back. The second-person POV was one. This is a great narrative device if you want levity, but if you want to create a character that readers love and believe in, you can't do that in the second person. So I decided before I even had an idea that I was going to write in the first person, huge deviation from the commonly accepted practices in this genre. I also decided that I didn't like the loose structure. I wanted to create something that readers would recognize as a beginning, middle, and end. The interactivity and story choices would affect the beginning, middle, and end, but there would still be a character arc. So I deviated from the genre's common practices again. Eventually, I came up with the idea of a moral, ethical story. What if someone had magical powers and had to make decisions based on those powers? What if those magical powers were granted by a demon? What if the hero or heroine was being controlled by that demon and had to make decisions between worse and worst? What if she had no other choice but to be bad? I settled on the title How to Be Bad, which later became Magic Souls. It ultimately was the story of Bibi McFerrin, a young attorney who's a pushover. She has no confidence and can't stand up for herself. When a coworker steals her only chance for promotion, Bibi wishes that she could be stronger, wishes that she could be meaner. Enter the demon Ledouche, who grants Bibi the ability to commit any crime without punishment. She can do anything she wants, and he guarantees that she will have immunity. So of course, Bibi falls for it and gets revenge against her coworker. When the consequences for her coworker turn out to be life-changing in a bad way, Bibi regrets the deal and tries to shed her powers. But it turns out she's made a deal with the demon and she can't break the contract. If she does, she'll lose her own soul. Ledouche requires her to steal the souls of 3 innocent people as payment for his act of kindness. And this is where the story begins, with Bibi wrestling with her moral dilemma and coming to grips with her new powers. The story is what I call an ethical train wreck on every page. Bibi has to lie, cheat, and steal her way into 3 innocent people's hearts, and the decisions she makes are really just a matter of how she does it. There are multiple endings, and the story takes interactivity to the next level. Instead of flipping pages, I designed the book for e-readers, phones, and tablets, so that when you come to a decision, you simply tap on the decision you want. Also, because these books can get very big and very unwieldy sometimes, I built in mechanisms to stop you from getting lost, and it's always easy to go back to where you left off. And finally, my crowning achievement for the book is that I put a game show in the book. An actual game show that you, the reader, can participate in. I'm not kidding, and you have to see it to believe it. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but it's a complicated game show that's based on The Prisoner's Dilemma. That's a common game show framework, and it has multiple rounds that you can win or lose. There are multiple contestants who all make different decisions based on your choices. Seriously, it's a lot of fun. Anyway, this book was the result of learning the craft of writing a novel, twisting that and making it interactive, and some sophisticated book formatting. I like to joke that Magic Souls was an accelerated masterclass in how to write. I almost took on more than I could handle, but it was an amazing experience. When it was time to write my next novel, I was already writing and formatting at a level beyond most people's second books, at least in the sense that I knew how to write a multi-arc story and execute on multiple plots at the same time. So that's the story of my first novel. You can find it at michaelleron.com/magicsouls if you're interested. You can also read more about how I wrote my interactive elements in my book, Interactive Fiction. It's my manifesto on what I believe the genre can achieve in the 21st century. Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed the show, here are a couple ways to help a brother out. If you're listening to this on Anchor, favorite the show. If you're listening to this on a podcast app, do me a favor and write me a review and share it with your friends. You can, of course, visit my website and learn more about my work at michaelleron.com. If you have a question, send me a voice message on Anchor and you just might hear it on the show. Next week, I'll be giving an update on what I'm currently working on, and I'll be answering your questions. Until then, I leave you with a quote. There are plenty of skills I've learned from playing video games. It's more interactive than watching TV because there are problems to solve as you're using your brain. Shaun White.